Okay, here we go again, and now we're going to just refine a little bit more and eventually get this guy's hands into place for holding on to his stick, right? His classical academic life model stick. And you guys are going to get probably sick of seeing me just refine and refine and refine and refine and refine. But that's what this stage is all about. And it just is it's a process of really kind of being very exacting with your vision of what you're looking at, and just being really, really hard on the shapes of your model, right? So it's as much about vision and observation as it is about executing in technique. You really just have to be able to tell from observation what the differences are. So what I'm going through here as I'm just talking about all this is I'm just doing what I'm just kind of blabbering on about. I'm being very critical of the angles that are being set up with the pose, right? All these things are quite distinct in this particular pose, right? So angles of the feet coming off on the floor. Hands and arms, angles of the upper arm versus the lower arm, especially the tilt of the back, a little bit of twist at the waist. Those are the sorts of things that we tried to capture a little bit with our Z-Sphere rig. We did our best at that point, but as we get the forms and the shapes tighter and tighter, we will have to refine and just get it better and better. That's the goal. We never give up on making our pose tighter. Okay, so I must have gotten bored of making it tighter, and we're back to muscles, which is slightly more fun. And this is again just blocking stage. You can see I'm still empty in the stomach, so I'm just kind of scanning through my reference and trying to pick out some of the important forms that we're seeing. Some of these are over modeled. I readily admit, but I have a little mental note to revisit all of these. Right? You see, look at that. Just be a good way to start the rectus abdominis if you have very kind of defined muscles there. Just sketch it in because these boundaries are the important part. These are the characteristics you want to. It's drawing, right? What I've just done is drawing. I've drew on the mesh, and it's looking at your reference and then being able to draw a triangle of this or a rectangle of this aspect ratio, or whatever it ends up being, right? So, me lecturing you for whatever it's been now, many weeks on the importance of drawing. This is a tiny little example of why. It's important. Enough said, lecture finished. And we'll speed through this because as I refine more and more, I have a lot of little tiny strokes that go on, and the time lapse can get fairly protracted, but we'll see. Jumping around a little bit right now, just kind of tweaking volumes. Essentially what happens is I'll be working on an area, and I'll tell you exactly what it is as I rewind this. I was starting to get to the serratus anterior here. Right, so as I kind of study all this stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, there's going to be some external obliques coming back this way, and they're going to interdigitate with the serratus anterior. I get the proportions of these right. You saw me just draw those in. Those are blocked in pretty well. And I'm starting to go back, and I've pretty confident in the proportion of my my external oblique, and I bring them back, and what? There's no serratus anterior here, right? And it's because, like I mentioned earlier, they're too far back. All right, what I've blocked in here is pretty pretty poor. and needs to be redone. And so that's what set off this next cascade of me hopping around, adjusting, pulling this back surface forward, trying to adjust the proportions to get these guys up to the right level, which would be kind of the level of the nipple, right? So the nipple is like that. The serratus anterior will be up forward. Okay, so that's me kind of just going crazy and like, oh no, big problem. So that's the kind of thing that you don't discover until you're working into your forms, you know, and it just happens, and you deal with it as you get closer. And literally, it has set off a cascade of adjustments. Um, but it's good. It has to be done sometime, so why not now? Do it when you see it. You guys have less forgiving, more forgiving circumstances, and that you're not time lapsing the whole thing, so you can pretty much do whatever you want. I try to stay moderately focused on certain areas for a bit of time, anyways. Okay, he's doing okay. That's a more or less a first pass on most of the form, right? As I just spin back and forth. Again, some of it's overmodeled, some of it's a little bit underdeveloped, but he's started, right? So some people would say, yeah, it's pretty close to done, but where we're trying to go with this whole thing is we're trying to go to really, really kind of a quality that this isn't quite to yet, you know. So it has work to be done. And where I'm at now is I'm starting to think about having to put this stick in there. So I'm adjusting the rotations of the arms. And it looks like I'm finally back on topic with what I eventually diverged from, which was the serratus anterior, right? So I'm again earlier when we were doing the torsos, these things kind of vexed me as well. So you know what? Not happy. Rubbing it out. And let's start again. Pretty much, not only were they too far back, but they were misaligned as far as height goes, right? For the actual interdigitating here. So I need to go in and move one of these up. Put the second one in here. This is my little cartoon serratus anterior now. And then the very top one will be kind of the level of the fifth rib up, going up underneath the chest, right? So get ready to make new serratus anterior. Again, you guys will be tired of this soon. Sausages. Tasty. Those don't look like sausages, by the way. And remember, as I get through this, these guys are coming all the way back and up from out from under the scapula. Right, so this volume here needs to be continuous, right? You don't want to have these be a certain thickness in here and then this be either more or less thick, right? They're going to be kind of the same. And then over top of that, of course, we're going to run the latissimus dorsi, right? So that's going to cover everything. So you're going to get the thick cord here and then thinner in the back. But just remember that that muscle body is continuous all the way back to the scapula. And so I'm trying to resolve the overlap of forms right there. At a certain point, it becomes a little bit slow. It build up the forms as I'm doing it with the clay tubes, but I've decided that it's easier for you guys to understand what I'm doing when I have a lot of strokes building up form than just a single one with a standard brush or something. Gives you a little bit of time to see where they're going and what they're doing. So really this is just, again, observing the reference external oblique coming back, looking back here at kind of the lower bit of the rib cage for its insertion, and then fat, right? There's actually a lot of gesture to this guy in the pose coming in like this, and this kind of fills up with fat. Probably the only fat on this guy's body is sitting in there. Okay, I'm getting into quite a bit of refinement here. So this is kind of somewhat between the blocking stage and the refining stage. Probably, I don't know if I'm a little bit ahead of myself, but got carried away. But as you go, just do as much refinement as you feel that you want to, but be sure that you're, every time that you go smaller and deeper in your kind of refinement, that you're putting the right forms in and that you're observing the right things, right? So all the stuff that I was just doing in here, I'm observing, and I'll just slide back actually because it's probably worth commenting on. All this stuff in here that I'm just kind of spinning through. This is really kind of complex planes actually that I'm just trying to construct because his external obliques are tensed on this side, right? We saw digits up here, but this doesn't show any digitation because it's really stretched side to side. He's compressed on the other hip and he's kind of twisted a little bit as well. But this big flat sheet of muscle here is tensed tight over the rib cage. So what we're having in here is kind of the bottom of the rib cage being kind of smashed in and constrained by these tensed hip muscles. Or sorry, yeah, not hip muscles, side muscles, the external obliques, right? So that's holding them in. And that's what we're trying to capture with that little bit of refinement. Okay. Probably too light. At some point you see my Z intensity is low with this clay tubes brush, and I have my embed depth is actually at 5 now instead of 10, so it makes for a very subtle buildup of form. You can control it quite a lot, but it's not going anywhere fast. So hopefully you're a fast crosshatcher if you're using this kind of technique, because it pays to be fast. Because you can see how slow the time lapse is going, so it must have taken a bit of time. So working in the fat pad, we're starting to try to re-observe some of the stuff that's happening there. Like all this was blocked in very quickly in the kind of the first stage, and we'll consider this a second stage, which is pass 2. So really starting to go in and see the forms for what they are. Pass 3 will be in the coming weeks, and it'll be just a verification and really a tightening of all the little forms, and then a finishing of the surface will be kind of the last thing that we want to do. Okay, that takes us to the end of that little refinement pass, right? So again, small changes. All these things will become less and less perceptible, probably, to everybody, but somebody who's looking for kind of very good, kind of high level of naturalism. So we're going to get there, and that's the goal. But now we need to address and start to think about what we're going to do with this legging bit of our sculpt, which is the hands, right? Because these aren't cutting it right now. And I try not to let anything leg behind in my sculptures too much, but I admittedly let the hands leg, and I admittedly let the feet, toes leg, because like I mentioned in the hand week, these are like little sculptures in themselves, with probably in one hand has as much complexity as what I've just done here, right, with planes and angles and everything. So it's going to require kind of a concerted effort. So it'll be next week that we actually go in and pose the hands completely and grasp the bar. But what I want to do now is to actually get the bar in place, right? So this little thing is just a cylinder that's come out of a ZBrush primitive, right? So if I go all the way back, as I was just kind of talking randomly, I've made a ZBrush cylinder. And down, if you get these cylinders, you have an initialized palette. You could bring in a cylinder from another application if you want, but people who are just purely native in ZBrush will want to use this. And really, let me just step forward. This goes crazy. You have X size, Y size, and Z size, and pretty much you just want the width and the length. So play with those, and then you can transpose the overall scale of it when it's subtooled to our sculpture. Okay, and so that's just me playing with these. I end up with like 2, 2, and 100. I would actually recommend, if you're listening to this, I'd recommend 1, 1, and 100. It will give you a thinner pull, which is probably better to grip. You'll see that this is going to be a little bit too thick to really sit in his hands, and I fiddle with it a bit too much. So when you have your cylinder, kind of when you're happy with the proportion of it, you hit Make Polymesh 3D, and it makes it into something that you can add to your model as a subtool. And so that's where we go. I go down here and I say append, and it pulls this out, and Polymesh 3D, and it's then sitting, it's the pull going between his legs. Yeah, want to move that soon. Okay, and I'm not transposing it right now. I could easily use transpose as well, but I'm using the deformation, offset, and rotate just to, I don't know, be different, I guess. You can see it didn't last for long. I quickly got bored and started to use transpose. What I'm looking at here is I'm really looking at all the angles, right? So really getting a good look at the reference, how this is sitting relative to his neck, relative to his shoulder, where it's going, and then how it relates to the hands. Okay, hands we're actually going to move a little bit because we're going to twist them and things, but really this is the critical aspect, getting it across the shoulders, behind the neck. Okay, and then you see that what I'm saying about it being too thick is actually quite wide in cross section, and so it's going through his neck a little bit. So I spent a little bit of time trying to get this off the neck and sitting in a good place. And the last magic bit that you guys are going to need if you're happy with all your joint angles, right? If you're happy with everything that you've posed already, and you're like, but my pull doesn't fit through his hands. I've been meticulous about my joint angles. Well, do what I do and go in and actually do a bone and rotate the pull like it is in the model. It actually has some bend to it because it's not 100% rigid, right? So that's what I'm doing here. You see that I'm just transposing a rotation forward. So mask is kind of blurring up through here and bringing that forward. So it's going to fit in our hand, and I'm just kind of gauging it relative to the thumb. Ignore that, please. Okay, so we're going to do that on both sides eventually. And that's the magic secret to placing the pull, is bend it into the right place and starting to transpose the thumb just to get it out of the way and to give us an idea how this thing needs to sit relative to the hand, right? Because the variable from here that we have to play with to get this to actually work is we have some pronation and supination in the wrist that will bring the palm back to the right orientation, so that pretty much we want our finger pads, our palmar pads, to be aligned kind of with this, so we can grip over the top of it. Right, so we're going to have to, one, move the thumb out of the way, and two, adjust the twist on the forearms, and then also rotate the wrists. Right, so it's a little bit involved, and we'll take some trial and error. You can see I'm getting there right now, and this kind of relates back to what we did in our hand week when we did pronation and supination. You're using the transpose bone from the lateral, just in front of the lateral epicondyle, down to just a little bit, well, off center towards the ulnar side. And that's going to give us our twist axis. So you can see I've just done it there. Right, that's kind of the rotation for the twist. And I'm grabbing this with the center dot, and you'll see it go around. So you see that now I've twisted it. Palms is going this way, axis is going this way. And pretty soon it's just going to be maybe bending the pull a little bit more, and maybe actually twisting the arm about axis up here. This is hard. This is hard work to do in ZBrush. This is where you want inverse kinematics. But hey, you know what? We don't have inverse kinematics, so we're going to do this the old-fashioned way, with forward kinematics, or by bending the pull, which is what I've just done. And now you can see that after a little bit of effort, we have this resting in the hand, and that's pretty good. I think I'm pretty happy with that. There'll be probably a few tweaks to the wrist to do when we're going to start to pose the fingers. These horrible long fingers will need to be proportioned a little bit and put into a grip, which is going to be a bit of work. Okay, so this one as well. Yeah, look, the stick is going through his fingers. So you know what? Let's just rotate that stick forward. I've used the masking, done a little transpose mask by dragging this down, and then I'm using the actually clicking on blur mask instead of clicking on the mesh because it's so thin. It's given me a few problems just losing my transpose bone. Okay, so pretty much if we're to this point where the thumb is, where the stick is going through the gap between the first finger and the thumb, then we really just need to start to do this the twist to get the rest of the palm aligned. And so hopefully I do that soon. Let me try to get the thumb out of the way first. And that little transpose you just saw there was me transposing the last two metacarpals forward, right? So that's one of the variables that we have when we start to grip, is these guys will be resting firm, and these guys can actually move forward to meet the pull. Okay, let me just see where we go with this. It's starting to look pretty good. I'll probably fine-tune a little bit, including a tiny scale on the hands to bring them down a tiny bit because they're actually probably a little too large out of the box. This is something that a diligent student would have done in the proportioning phase, but we'll pay the price now. Okay, that's it for placing the hands in the pull, right? So that kind of gets us pretty close, and it adds a little bit to our model as well, right? So we have context now, and hopefully you're not going final with this if you still need to do posing of the torso. Although I'll probably do a little lecture on Transpose Master, one of the plugins that will allow you to transpose this and this at the same time. Okay, I will be back in a little bit, and we'll just finish off with a tiny bit more refinements, and then I'll let you guys off to do your work. Okay, see you in a little bit.